You're listening to the Just Japan podcast. Everything you want to know about Japan.
Well, hey there, folks, and welcome to episode number 176 of the Just Japan podcast, everything you want to know about Japan. My name's Kevin, and I'm the host of this weekly podcast that brings you a whole bucket full of Japanese goodness each and every week. That's right. We talk to people who live in Japan, who have lived in Japan, who have some connection with Japan, and we share those connections, those experiences with you. I am very excited to be putting out another episode less than 1 week after 175. And last week's episode was a great one. I talked to Kaori, and she's just an awesome person who shared her experiences with awa odori dancing. Awa odori. I guess awa odori dancing is like me saying awa dancing. And that was a really fascinating topic for the podcast. And again, I want to thank her so much for coming on. Now, this week we're talking about surviving. That's right. Getting through life in Japan. Now, the reason why we're having this episode or this topic is because I recently made a post on justjapanstuff.com. Now, of course, remember, the Just Japan podcast is fueled by justjapanstuff.com. And on that one, I called that post, Can You Survive, or Can I Survive on an English Teacher's Salary? And it wasn't meant to be a negative thing or a poo-poo type thing. What it was meant to be a dose of reality for those who are interested and maybe coming to Japan to work in that sector as a teacher, an English teacher. I want people to really understand what they're getting themselves into before they make the move. And of course, what I did mention in that article is that, of course, becoming a teacher is an excellent way to get to Japan if that's what you want to do. You want to get to Japan and experience Japan, live in Japan, learn the language. That's a great way to get over. But what I did talk about in that article is that essentially the beginning pay for English teachers is not good. And in some cases, the pay is quite bad. And it can be a challenge to live comfortably on that salary. And if you have a family, it may be next to impossible to live and survive on that salary. And again, we'll talk about it in the interview portion of the podcast. You can go to justjapanstuff.com and read that article that I wrote. And you'll see. So I invited a long-time friend of the Just Japan podcast, Andrew Higgins, at Higgins82 on Twitter, to come back on the podcast, Higgins in Japan on YouTube. And, it was really surprising how long it's been since we've had a chance to talk, period. I mean, of course, you'll know that the Just Japan podcast went on a hiatus from essentially July until the new year, 2018. And that was for a variety of reasons, mostly my transition to life in Beijing, China, changing jobs, moving my family from Japan to Beijing, where I work here now. And it was a big life transition. And really what happened was when I got back to Japan for my winter holiday, it really excited me, and it really revitalized my love and passion for Japan and, wanting to share it with you guys. So, but I realized when I loaded up Skype last night to do this interview with Andrew, that the last time we had spoken was 9 months ago, and that would have been at the Sayonara Party podcast episode with him and Molly and PJ and Scott from Chill in Kansai. Long time. So we talk about that article. We talk about life as an English teacher, but we talk more about the pay and the lifestyle. And then we talk about some other topics. We talk about the Olympics. We talk about the whole Logan Paul thing. It was just in the news yesterday that YouTube has temporarily suspended all monetization on all of his videos. And I think a lot of people are applauding that. A lot of people who are not Logan Paul fans, people who are Japan fans. And I suppose if you're a Japan fan, you're definitely not a Logan Paul fan. Those two don't mix after his shenanigans and hijinks here a few months back. And I don't mean here because I'm in Beijing, but I keep when I do this podcast, I keep forgetting that I'm not in the old Just Japan podcast studios in Kobe, Japan. So we have a really great conversation. Now, before we get into that, I just want to spread some joy. I made a YouTube video yesterday where I talked about community and there needing to be more of a sense of community. And there are people who are doing that. And one is James over at the ALT Insider podcast. Go check out that podcast if you're into Japan, but also go check out the Japan Podcast Network over at japanpodcastnetwork.com. A lot of Japan-related content there. A lot of podcasts about Japan, based in Japan. So the Japan Podcast Network, I should say just go to japanpodcastnetwork.com. And some other exciting Japan-related podcasting news. The boys over at Beer Tengaku. Now, Beer Tengaku that's the place where if you care about beer, especially craft beer in Japan, you want to go there. So that's beertengaku.com or Tengoku, BEERTENGOKU.com. They started a podcast. I'm so excited to have another podcast on the scene. So that is the Beer Tengaku podcast. They put out one episode. That went out on February the 3rd. Just go to beertengaku.com. You'll find a link to it. Do a search for them in the iTunes store, or I should say Apple Podcasts. They're on Libsyn. They're all over the place. There will be links in the show notes at justjapanstuff.com for this episode and how you can go and check out the Japan Podcast Network and the Beer Tengaku podcast. So without further ado, listen to my chat with Mr. Andrew Higgins, Higgins in Japan on YouTube, as we talk about stuff in Japan, especially surviving on a teacher's salary. All right, folks, it is episode 176 of the Just Japan podcast, and we've got a regular, so to speak, someone who's been on the show more than once, but it's been a long time since he's been on the show. Welcome back, Mr. Andrew Higgins.
Hey, how's it going?
It's great, and I'm on holiday right now. I'm on a 2-week holiday. Started yesterday with the Chinese New Year here in China, ironically enough. Or they tend to have Chinese New Year. So I've got time to produce a lot of content. And episode 175 went up last night, and I'm recording 176 tonight, and I'm probably going to upload it within the next couple of days.
Very cool.
Yeah. So you guys out there listening, you're lucky when I'm on holiday because you get more content. Yay! So I asked Andrew to come on, number one, because I just haven't talked to him in a long time.
Yeah, you said the last time I was on was the Sayonara party.
Yes, yeah. The last time you were on, yes, absolutely. The last time you were on the Just Japan podcast was the Sayonara party episode back in July of 2017.
It doesn't seem like it was that long ago, but holy cow!
Who was it? There was you and Jim and Scott, Chillin Kansai, and PJ. Did PJ make
I think so. Yeah, I think PJ was there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All the usual suspects.
Yeah.
No, that's the last time. I mean, I recorded a solo episode in the fall, and then I posted another episode where I interviewed Dan in Japan, Jadan.
Yeah.
Based out of like Akashi, Kobe.
Yeah.
So that was it. Those are the only, from July until January, those are the only 2 episodes.
But you're back.
Oh, I'm back. Yeah.
And that's what matters.
I'm back. Yeah, weekly episodes. That's right. Yeah, I've got the time now, and I'm back in the groove, and I'm really excited to be podcasting again. So, yeah, each week. So we just had what have we had? We had the Real Japan. Come on, talk about the realjapan.com. So far since the New Year's begun, we talked about last week's episode was about third culture kids in Japan. Which is a very interesting topic. So, imagine if you've got like an American family who has a child born in Japan, and that kid goes to Japanese school and lives their whole life here, yet parents are not Japanese.
I've got a few of those students.
Yeah. So, I mean, they're called, there's a term for them. They're called third culture kids.
Yeah.
So a lot of them, they're technically American, but they don't feel American in any way or any connection. But at the same time, they don't really feel a connection to Japan. So.
Yeah. I've even got some students that are straight up American kids, like their parents work for Honda, I believe, and they're here for about a year and a half. So yeah, it's kind of interesting for them because they get to experience Japan public school life for about a year and a half and then go back home. So
I assume there's no international schools anywhere near where you live. Would that be the case? Because normally, or maybe the parents just want the kids to have that experience?
I think maybe it's part of that. I'm not sure if there's international schools in this area. I mean, there's got to be, right?
Because normally, if you're going to be coming over on some kind of like, you work for a big corporation like Honda, you're Honda USA, and you come over, you're transferred. Normally, part of that transfer package is they put your kids in a international school.
Yeah, maybe they do. Like, I'm not sure if they do any sort of like, after school tutoring for them. I'm not sure what that includes. But yeah, I mean, and it goes both ways because I've got some students that are Japanese students who have lived in America for quite a few years. And so they come back and, get to hang out with me because they're the ones that I rely on in class sometimes.
They would be the returnees, I think they call them, right?
Yeah. I'm like, hey, explain this.
Tell everyone what to do. Nice. Well, you know what? There's a bunch of topics I wanted to talk about this evening, Andrew. The first thing, this evening, sitting here in my apartment in Beijing with my family, I was watching Olympic moguls on TV on CCTV, the Chinese broadcaster, and it was in Chinese, but it's people skiing down a hill and jumping and bouncing and crashing and stuff. I'm curious. Obviously, my wife is Japanese and she's very connected to the Japanese community and is always watching, NHK and reading Japanese news. And she's really interested in what's going on with the Olympics, especially the story of the ski jumper Kasai, the Japanese ski jumper, who it's his like 8th Olympics.
Oh, wow.
He's like 45 years old and this is his 8th Olympics. It's really insane.
That's cool.
So like at school, where you're working or around town, is there much buzz about the Olympics there in Japan?
Well, I mean, the opening ceremonies were just the other night, and so I was really busy on Friday with end of year stuff with one of my schools, so didn't really get a chance to talk to anybody about it. But
okay.
Yeah, I mean, usually every time there's an Olympics, it seems to be a pretty big, and they always look to me and they're like, "Oh, how many medals does America have this year?" Like, "Oh, I don't know, how many medals does Japan have this year?" It's just always been a friendly competition in the teacher's office or even with some of the students. I remember when what was it, the American softball team was playing the Japanese softball team, and I ran outside, and this was when I was still coaching softball, and my students were like, "Oh, who won?" And I just started chanting USA, and that didn't go over too well with the team. But yeah, I mean, and especially since Japan has the Olympics coming up in 2020, yeah, I think everybody's really excited. And because the Olympics are so close, just being over in Korea this year, it's
Don't you find that there's a really different kind of like there's a really different interest, I think, when it comes, or level of interest in Japan when it comes to sports. Like, for example, marathon runners are household names in Japan. I mean, one of the biggest sporting events of the year is the Hakone Ekiden, which is like live broadcasted on the 2nd and 3rd of January, which is essentially a 2-day marathon relay. Yet they have like millions upon millions of people watching it on TV.
Yeah.
One of the biggest sporting events in Japan is high school baseball.
Oh yeah, during the summertime. Holy cow.
Like there's really a really different kind of perspective on sports versus say like America or Canada. Yeah.
I feel like, I don't know if that has to do with like the community in Japan, if it's like, the national pride, or like, hey, that team or that runner is from, my town. So like there's this need to like cheer that person on. I don't know what. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah, it's again, like, I mean, for example, one of the big stories I've heard. I mean, I'm a big follower of all things Japan, obviously. Although I'm not in Japan at the moment, but there's so much I see on the news about this like 45-year-old ski jumper named Kasai.
Right.
He's maybe not doing as well as he could at the moment, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's this freaking 8th Olympics. I mean,
yeah, he's in the Olympics.
Or 5th Olympics or 8th. I don't know what it's crazy. It's like a record number. It's something wild.
Yeah.
But you know what? Actually, I just realized, Andrew, as we're already like 8 minutes into the podcast. I didn't ask you to introduce yourself.
Oh,
And you know
that's
what?
all right.
And you know what? Of course, Just Japan podcast fans know who you are, but there's possibly people who are listening to this episode. This is their first taste of the podcast. So I'm going to backtrack for a moment and ask you just to take a moment or two to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do in Japan, where you're from, and all your YouTubity doobity goobity goodness.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's see. Higgins in Japan, that's what people call me. I've been living in Japan since 2012, so coming up on 6 years. Previous to that, I lived in Pennsylvania. I lived a few different states, but before I moved to Japan, it was Pennsylvania. And no, I'm not an Eagles fan, despite them just winning the Super Bowl. I grew up in Texas, where I watched real football, the Dallas Cowboys. I'm just kidding. I have a lot of Eagles fans, or a lot of Eagles friends.
I'm gonna get hate mail. I'm gonna get hate mail.
Yeah. Sorry.
Send it to him. Send it to him.
Yes, send it all my way.
At Higgins82 on Twitter.
Yeah. But yeah, so I'm from America, and I came to Japan originally back in 2000, right after I graduated high school, because I had always wanted to live in Japan, or always wanted to at least visit Japan, and was able to have that opportunity right after high school, and just really fell in love with Japan, and then came back to the Kobe area in like 2008, and was there for the summer, and again was like, yeah, I really love Japan. I really need to figure out a way to get here, and found out that teaching was an easy way to get into Japan. So went back that summer. That was my junior year of college, and decided to switch majors, which I don't recommend doing junior year.
True, right? That's some bad timing there.
Yeah, right. But fortunately, I was able to graduate a semester after I should have. So
Okay.
it was I
It
did a lot of.
It could have been worse.
Yeah, it was a lot of me like moving schedules around and making sure I could take summer classes and trying to test out of some classes and that sort of thing. But, I made it. And about a year after I graduated, finally got a job teaching in Ibaraki. And I lived in Ibaraki Prefecture for about 5 years until I moved last year to Tochigi, which is where I currently live.
Cool. And that's a nice segue. Because
Yeah.
I mean, you're working in Japan as a teacher. You're teaching English. You've been doing that for quite a while. You've had experience in different, situations, working for different employers and whatnot. Again, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was I posted a blog post on justjapanstuff.com today. That's kind of like my blog site and the home for the podcast. And I titled it, "Can You Survive on an English Teacher's Salary?" And, I kind of talked about some realistic things. Didn't mean it to be like a negative dream crusher kind of thing.
Right.
But just realistically, at the end of the day, kind of, from my experience, and from what I see when you just basically surf through job ads on a site like gaijinpod.com, the pay isn't always so good when you're a teacher.
Well, yeah, and it's funny because I just got a message on Twitter a couple days ago from somebody who was asking about, can I afford to be an English teacher? Like, can I live on a salary? Yeah, and I feel like a lot of the jobs on Gaijin Pod, and I think you touched on this in the article, is that the higher end salaries are going to be for people that have qualifications or have a lot of experience. You're not going to get one of those higher paying teaching jobs right out of the gate with no experience. And for me, for a while, that took me a while to kind of, I had some teaching experience in America, but sometimes that doesn't always translate to experience in Japan. And so for me, it took me a while to kind of realize, okay, I need to get some experience here in Japan. And then once that happens, then job offers come, or, you can go into an interview and say, like, here's the things that I can bring to this, company. And not really like a list of demands, but you can basically say, like, here's what I can do for you guys.
You can market yourself better. So
right. Yeah, definitely.
You can pitch yourself better.
Yeah, and so it can take a couple of years. You know, you might have to work at a dispatch company like I did for a few years, and which it's not a totally terrible experience, but it's something that I recommend that if you do, you don't do it for a very long time.
Well, yeah, and I mean that's the thing too. Like,
So,
I suppose, like in the article I wrote, I said, at the end of it, of course, for many people who want to come to Japan, teaching can be that golden ticket, as in it will get you that visa to get to Japan.
Right, and I guess it really depends on what your like intent is. Like I've wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to teach in Japan, so I have long-term goals of staying in Japan. I've met plenty of people that have been very straightforward and said, I just want to come to Japan for a year because I just want to live in Japan. They don't want to be teachers, and they just see that as an easy way to get to Japan. So,
well, I mean, I think, to be honest, I would probably say the majority of people who are in Japan working as English teachers don't want to be teachers.
Yeah, and I have mixed feelings on that because I know people that have come to Japan, and I work with people that don't have teaching degrees but are excellent teachers.
Yeah.
And so it's not me saying oh, you're terrible.
No. That's actually like there's like there's a few different categories, I suppose. There are definitely people who are in Japan teaching in places like Korea and China who do not have a teaching qualification, who are absolutely fine teachers. Like some of them are inspiring, incredible, professional, hard-working teachers. Those aren't the people I'm talking about. I'm talking about there are definitely a lot of people who come to Japan just because they love Japan and they loved manga and anime, and they're into cosplay, these are not bad things. I'm not and pejoratively. Yeah. It's just that's why they came to Japan, and teaching, or they just they want to travel, which again, these are all good things. I'm not poo-pooing on it, but they came to teaching is something that gives them a paycheck that allows them to do the things that they want to do.
Right.
So they're
and like those aren't bad things. No. It's just for me, like, it's hard because I've talked to people that because there's a lot of people that obviously like look down on ALTs or being an English teacher in Japan. It's not a real job. It's not a real career, that type of thing. And you kind of have to explain to some of those people, like, yeah, for some people it's not. For some people it is. There's some people that went to school to be teachers and they want to teach English. And, I like what I do. And, maybe I won't be an English teacher for 50 years, but, it's what I enjoy doing. And so, I don't know. It's kind of weird when you get people that are like, oh, well, you're an ALT, so you're not a real teacher. And I'm like,
I can remember, like, back in my days in Korea. So I was a teacher in Korea for 5.5 years. And those 5.5 years in Korea teaching, I didn't have a teaching degree. I had a Bachelor of Arts, but I wasn't a trained teacher or anything like that. But I really enjoyed teaching, and I really cared about what I did, and I took it seriously. And there was nothing that got my goat more than being in a pub on a Friday night or a Saturday night and bumping into someone who worked at a university or an international school, and they started talking about what you did. And they're like, and then oh, you're not a real teacher, you're an English teacher. And I was just like, I am a real teacher. Like, I teach children every friggin' day, and I like prepare for my classes, and I do work, and on the weekends I'm on the internet like reading about, well, maybe not so much then, that was a long time ago, but like trying to find ways to learn about like how to teach lessons better, and talking to other teachers about planning lessons and what I could do and to improve my abilities. So that just, there was nothing that just, I think I probably got into more than one shouting match in a bar on a Friday night over that one.
Yeah, like I used to live in a town that had a power plant in it, and so there were a lot of foreigners that would come into town, and they would work for anywhere from a few months to a few years. And yeah, you run into those people sometimes, and they're like, "Oh, well, you're not an actual teacher." I'm like, We're in public, so I will
I will remain civil.
I will choose my words carefully. No, but and I had conversations with some of those people and was like, listen, yes, some of the people here don't want to be English teachers and it's an easy way for them to get into Japan, but I actually went to school. Originally, I didn't go to school to be a teacher. My degree was going to be in student ministry. I was a youth pastor for a few years, so like that was what my degree was going to be in, but junior year, switching majors and all that stuff. But yeah, like originally, like I wanted to be a teacher. So yes, I am one of those ALTs that took classes to learn how to be an English teacher. And in my free time at school, I read educational journals online
and blogs and like websites. I'm sure like Edutopia and stuff that actually help you be a better teacher. Yeah.
That stuff's interesting to me to learn about different learning aspects and and ways to help students learn languages better. I don't like that stuff just interests me, and that's
well, I mean, that's well, I mean, so I mean, I think like when I wrote the article, I think I was just wanting to, I don't know, over the years I've heard myths and rumors. I know like when I lived in Korea, I lived there back in the day. People used to all think, like I know Korean people would think in general, there's a stereotype that English teachers were rich. English teachers made lots of money. And it was really impressive because, we didn't at all.
Yeah.
And yet,
I've gotten comments from that about that from certain Japanese teachers. Yeah.
I'd have parents, like kids who would show up to school wearing like clothes by Gucci, and Versace, like kids Versace and stuff. And then hear from their mothers that, teachers make a lot of money. It was just like, what?
Where
is this money? I lived in a one-room apartment. Like literally, it was like there was one room that had the kitchen, the dining room, the bedroom, all in one room. And then there's
I mean, hey, that was my first apartment was like that here in Japan. It was I mean, it was bigger than a Leo Palace, which is what normally seems to be the route that dispatch companies send people down. Is just here's a Leo Palace. But it was still, one room. I could lay in bed and see the kitchen.
I could lay in bed and touch the kitchen.
Like
cooking eggs in bed, reach
over
and scramble them.
But yeah, and like now, obviously, like I have a different job and still teaching English, but I've got a town.
But you moved up in the world.
Yeah, I've got a townhouse now where I got 2 floors and I can't see my kitchen from my room. No. So it's a nice little upgrade. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, again, with that article I wrote, I just wanted to share, like, the reality is, I mean, don't get me wrong, there are really good jobs that they're teaching English. And I know that because, like, I've got friends who, where I worked in Kobe at an international school, and there was about a year and a half ago, there was kind of a mass exodus of our elementary school teaching team. Pretty much the entire teaching team left at once, and for various reasons. A lot of us had just been in Japan for a long time,
right?
And it was just like time. We had amassed a certain skill set, a lot of training, a lot of our resumes were looking real good, and we just moved on to different opportunities. But a few of my friends moved on to different job opportunities in Japan. And one of them, I know one of my friends moved up to Gifu, where he's teaching English, I believe. It might be like he's teaching English at an international, no, it's not an international school. It's a Japanese private school. But he's making like, oh God, what's he making? He's making like gojuman yen a month or more.
My gosh.
Plus he gets like subsidized housing. And
right.
like they gave him like a moving expense to move up there. They gave him like Nijuman to move up to Gifu. Another one of my friends moved to a private Japanese school in Shizuoka Prefecture somewhere, and he's making like 500,000 a month and da da da. So like doing real well. I mean, but these guys have qualifications. But at the end of the day, I mean, they came to Japan fresh off the boat.
Yeah, and it took them a while to
get
out
of school with no qualifications, and they just busted their humps for years. both of them had worked for several years and worked at, just really worked hard and really, obviously when it came time to leave, they showed these schools that they had what it took.
Right.
So, I mean, the opportunities are there. I was just basically want to say that, like, but at the same time, when you go to like Gaijin Pot, and I've seen some of these ads on Gaijin Pot before. I've seen like if you look early enough in the job hunting season,
yeah,
like November, just if you're looking through, so like November, like I've seen schools pop up that offer like 400,000 a month, 420,000 a month. They're not common, but you do see them.
Yeah,
they tend to be like private, like high schools or private middle schools kind of thing.
Right. And those schools definitely you have to have some kind of certification or, a lot of experience for.
A lot of experience or TESOL certificates or CELTA and stuff like that.
Yeah, because I got my job initially for the dispatch company that I worked at from Gaijin Pot. I saw the ad, filled out the application, and they started me out at what was it, 230,000 a month, and it was livable. There's issues with that because dispatch companies tend to prorate your salaries during certain months. They don't pay for insurance or healthcare or pension or healthcare, and they do tend to want you to live in the apartment that they find for you, which is usually not the cheapest. But if you can manage those things, I know plenty of people that have worked for dispatch companies for years that, they're not broke.
I think again, like one of the things that like I wrote about was that from my experience, most of the people I've met over the years I was in Japan, who were working in those situations, especially once they got to a point where they had a family, they basically had to have a lot of side hustles.
Right. So that's the other thing is
you gotta supplement that income somehow.
Yeah. So when I worked for the dispatch company, they actually had a contract with Hitachi, the electronics company. So I was able to teach business classes a couple nights a week and during the summer as well to kind of supplement my income. And I did that for 3 years. And yeah, it's a little bit extra work, but honestly, I feel like I'm a bit of a workaholic, and so it didn't really bother me.
You fit in. That's very Japanese of you, sir.
I know. Before I moved to Japan, I didn't have that problem at all. But I feel like working around Japanese people has kind of maybe inspired me to kind of step up my working ethics a little bit more. But I was able to supplement my income in the summertime when my salary was prorated, and plus it added just a whole nother aspect to my resume of I've taught these business classes, which
business English and private corporate business classes,
it's really fun, and it's a different experience than teaching in a public school. But yeah, you do have to take on some of those.
Well, you know what? Actually, that reminds me. I had a friend in Korea. When we think about where English teaching can take you. My first couple of years, I went to Korea in 2002 because I'm old, and I was there for a few, like I said, 5.5 years. But my first couple of years, I met this really great guy from New Zealand named Dave, and he had a Korean fiance, and they got married, and they've got one wonderful family. Blah 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 blah. I still follow them on Facebook and all that stuff. But he just worked at what they call hagwons, which are like eikaiwa in Japan, just private language schools. And he at one point it somehow popped up that Korea Air was looking for an English teacher to work at their headquarters, training flight attendants and pilots.
Right.
So he applied for it and he got it.
Wow.
And then what happened with that was that became a corporate job. They moved him and his wife into this massive apartment that no English teacher has, all paid for by the company.
Wow.
He wore, a suit and tie to work every day, and he taught pilots how to speak English, but the kind of pilot technical language and stuff.
Right.
So he had to study a lot to learn all of this technical language, but he worked for them for several years, making quadruple, 5 times what a typical English teacher would make.
Wow.
And he was an English teacher. And then he's still living in Korea now. Now he works for some massive construction company at their corporate headquarters, and that's what he does. And he's got this like big package, a corporate package that keeps him there. And I remember recently saying to him, like, are you going to head back to, years ago, he used to say you're going to head back to New Zealand to be like an elementary school teacher. And he's just like, why would I do that? Like he's like, I make way more money than an elementary school teacher would. You know, like I'm taking care of my family now as an English teacher better than I ever could. I was like, fair point.
Yeah. And those opportunities do exist here in Japan. It just takes time. And for me, I was like, you know, I mean, I went to college late, so I was, you know, still fresh out of college, but I still kind of thought, well, I can get a better job than just a dispatch company. And, you know, there were opportunities, but yeah, I mean, it took a while for those opportunities to come, and also the opportunity for me to turn down some of those opportunities when I knew that they wouldn't be, you know, beneficial or right. So it was, it takes time if you want to be an English teacher in Japan to kind of get some success outside of, you know, just working for a dispatch company or
an eikaiwa.
I mean, I never worked for an eikaiwa. So if you can deal with the hours and stuff like that, they pay really well. But like my friend, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. He'd just gotten a direct hire job, and he'd been working at an eikaiwa for 3 years, I believe.
Okay.
And he never had consecutive days off. He never had weekends off. Now he works at a public school or a couple public schools, and, you know, has a normal schedule now where he can actually, you know, hang out with us and do things. It's nice to you know, that he can have that opportunity. But, you know, if you're not really concerned with that and you're just, you know, there's a lot of people that like doing the eikaiwa thing. So it's just, it's kind of a personality thing. For me, I like having the weekends off. I like having holidays off, you know, that sort of thing. So,
yeah, I can remember when I worked at Hagwons in Korea, you know, a few lonely Christmases teaching kids. But I mean, I think too, like one piece of advice I've given to people over the years is, and I suppose it can go for anything, but sometimes when an opportunity appears, you got to move. So like, obviously, you know, you saw I surprised everyone last year when I announced that my whole family, we were going to be leaving Japan.
Right.
Everyone's just like, what the heck? What's going on here, Kevin? It's like, well, sometimes when we want to move up in the world, we have to make the big move in order to go where the opportunity is. And if the opportunity just wasn't presenting itself in Japan at the time, so we moved. And my move right now, where I'm here in Beijing, is probably going to open up a lot more doors for me in Japan. So, I mean, to be honest, I'd love to come back to Japan. No doubt about that at all. Or shall I say, no do to boot it, as a Canadian. But I mean, yeah. So I mean, I think you know, again, back to that Just Japan stuff. You know, blog post I wrote. Just, you know, at the end of the day, initial salaries normally aren't so good. But ironically enough, you do meet certain types of people who just aren't motivated, and you'll find certain people that will be in these like low-paying jobs for a really long time.
Yeah.
And that's often just because there tends to be a complete lack of motivation on their part. And those people are the ones who tend to complain the loudest.
Yeah, I'm picturing someone right now. But yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. The thing with me was I knew that this past year when I quit the dispatch company, I knew I was like, I was getting to the point where the right job needed to come along, or I was not seriously considering, but I was on the verge of considering just packing it up, because I couldn't deal with the dispatch life anymore. Like, 5 years was too long.
Yeah, I'm amazed that you spent that long doing it.
Yeah, me too.
But there's people who've been doing that for like a career.
Oh yeah, that's the thing. Like, we talked about James in the ALT podcast, Insider podcast, and I was on it a couple months ago, and was talking with, you know, some other English teachers, and yeah, it's something that I don't suggest doing for 5 years if you really want to be a teacher. it is an easy way to get to Japan. A lot of the dispatch companies don't have very high qualifications for getting in. Like
rigorous standards. Yes.
Yeah. Which hey, if you're just out of college, that's perfect. For me,
Yeah,
it was great because I had no experience in Japan. I mean, I had a little bit of teaching experience in Japan and teaching experience in America, but it was great for me. But yeah, you tend to get a lot of the people that just aren't motivated to do much more than.
Well, I mean, when I went to Japan, I had my teaching degree, but you see, the deal was I taught in Korea for 5 years, and I'm like, I really like teaching, so I'm going to get a straight up proper teaching credential and become an elementary school teacher. So I went back to Canada, I went back to university, got that credential. When I came to Japan, I got a job at an international kindergarten. So there's always an option too, and you don't always have to have a teaching credential to work in international kindergarten. Actually, I was one of the few ones in the company who had a teaching credential. Most people who just had a degree, but again, nonetheless, I met some really fine teachers. Some who weren't, but some who were definitely really fine. And by the way, a teaching credential doesn't make someone a good teacher.
No, it doesn't.
I've met some of the lousiest teachers I've met in my life. Some of the least professional had teaching degrees, and licenses in their home countries.
Yeah.
But I mean, so in my case, I was busting my hump, and I was having to work 6 days a week. I was having to work a Saturday gig to make ends meet, because I wasn't doing all that well at the time. But then, as luck would have it, my school applied for an actual. What would be the term? Like a qualification for the school, I suppose. Like an actual like a license for the school to become a proper. Sorry, the term is an accreditation. So they applied for an accreditation with the International Baccalaureate program, and they went through the whole like authorization process and years of being a candidate school, and then eventually they actually became a proper IB, International Baccalaureate School, which is kind of that is like the top standard around the world for international schools.
Right.
And I luckily was grandfathered into that.
Wow.
Which then I basically became a air quotes international school teacher proper.
Yeah.
And got to spend several years there, which is what got me to where I am today.
Right. And all that didn't happen overnight. So
that was almost 10 years, man.
Yeah.
But I've gotten to the air quotes big leagues of international schools now, but it was a slog. It was a tough road actually for me too. And that's one thing I wrote. There was there was definitely a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of tears trying to figure out how to pay bills, how we're going to pay our credit cards, how are we going to find money to buy like uniforms for our kids for their school, how are we going to pay the bus fee this month? Do I have to work more? Teach private lessons after work, even though I've worked like super long days. Yeah, man, I've been through all of that. So that's like one thing. When I wrote that article, I wasn't like, "Hey, all you guys down there."
Right. I mean, you've seen both ends of it, and so I think it's helpful. I mean, it's a realistic like thing for people to look at and say, okay, can I realistically support myself? And on a dispatch company salary, I could support myself. I don't think that I could have supported much more than myself.
Yeah.
But it's doable. And so it takes time and it takes some creative use of your money. Maybe you're not always going to Tokyo every weekend, and maybe you're not always going here and there, but there's enough to do in your own little town that over the years I found that some of my favorite things, like the town that I originally moved to when I lived in Ibaraki, is called Tokai.
Okay.
And every year they have a sweet potato festival.
Okay.
And that was one of my favorite festivals to go to. It was just a fun little local festival, and their bands played and they had raffles, and there were potatoes everywhere, and it was just a day-long event, and like stuff like that doesn't cost anything to go to. I mean, if you want to buy some food and stuff here or there, but
I totally get you, man. Like
so many things that you can do that don't cost any money. That
Well, I
are
mean, like
so worth it.
my hobbies that developed while I was in Japan were like getting into bugs and birds.
Yeah.
So I mean, I would literally like to entertain myself. I just did it today, actually. I just went to a big local park with my camera, and I just walked around the park all morning,
Yeah.
trying to get good pictures of cool nature things. That's
Yeah,
it.
that was
How much did it cost me? Nothing.
yeah, exactly. Like that was one of the first things. Like my first year in Japan, I didn't have a car, so it wasn't that difficult for me to just go out and walk around my neighborhood. But that was one of the things that I enjoyed doing. Was one, it's just good exercise, but two, you get to see kind of, I think, a side of Japan that you don't really see if you're in a car. You drive past it and it doesn't really, sink in or anything. But not only did I get to know the town that I lived in, but I got to see the little side streets and the side alleys and the little bars here and there and the neighbors and just, it's part of being part of the culture that you're in here in Japan. It's just, don't just stay inside. Go explore your town and take a walk every now and then and
Yeah.
see what's around you. And that doesn't cost anything. So
Yeah, ironically enough, you can tell I'm a dad right now because you know what popped into my brain? An episode of Neil. Everyone, I've got a 4-year-old daughter. An episode of Peppa Pig, where they went traveling. Where did they go traveling? They went traveling somewhere, and out in nature. And Daddy Pig just wanted to sit inside their caravan and watch a TV show. He was like, "Let's watch a TV show about nature."
yeah.
And the mommy pig's like, "But we're in nature. Let's go
We're in
explore it." He's like, "No, but I want to watch a TV show about nature." Yeah, it's like staying at home and watching YouTube videos about Japan when you live in Japan.
Right.
Go outside and experience it, right?
Yep.
Well, so there is a segue. Speaking of YouTube, we're going to jump
Yes.
topics now. I just read an article today on, I guess it's from Japan Today, but it's like on this like compilation site, newsonjapan.com.
Okay.
And it says that YouTube suspends ads from video star Logan Paul's channel. So there's a distinct Japan connection here.
Can you add like a sound effect of like people cheering at this point?
I know, huh? YouTube has temporarily suspended all ads from video star Logan Paul's channel after what it calls a pattern of behavior unsuitable for advertisers. And in the emailed statement, YouTube said that the videos on Paul's channels are also broadly damaging to the broader creator community. And then they talk about how like Paul did his thing at Mount Fuji and the suicide forest with the body, and then video of himself using a taser on dead rats. Oh, there we go. Great stuff. So there you go. So now I am definitely separated from the Japan YouTube community. I still post videos from time to time. I posted a video today, actually.
Yeah, I watched that video.
Hey, yeah, about like being like community stuff. By the way, that video was flagged as unsuitable.
Did you use the word community? Is that what it like?
I'm wondering now. Here's like they've changed their whole kind of like monetization, demonetization thing. So the last video I made a video about an abandoned shopping area in Beijing that's called Ladies Street because that's what it's called. Like
right.
the big sign says a Ladies Street because it was supposed to be geared towards women who like to shop, and it's just an abandoned place. And I walk around filming an abandoned shops. And it got flagged that is unsuitable for monetization.
Weird.
And I don't know why. Maybe because it said abandoned ladies street, like there's like abandoned ladies around. But then that video that I posted today called Let's Talk About Community, where I talked about how people should share each other's stuff and retweet each other's stuff.
That seems innocent enough.
Exactly, but it got flagged as unsuitable for advertisers. And
That's weird.
Luckily, because I have more than 10,000 subscribers on my channel, although none of them watch, but I do have more than 10,000 subscribers, I'm able to automatically fight back. Like there's a button I can click on that automatically I ask for someone to physically review my video.
Right.
And that happened with the Lady Street one. Within a day, it was monetized.
Weird. Yeah, like I'm looking through my list of videos, and if I go back to August 29th, there's a video that I titled, Higgins in Japan, North Korean missile alert, which I totally know why that got demonetized.
I think again, I think there's just these hot words, hot button words in there.
Yeah, but like that was just a video of me because there had just been North Korea had just shot a missile over Japan for the second time, and I was getting questions from people, and I know my parents don't, right out say it, but family and friends are worried when stuff like that happens.
Of course, yeah.
And my take on the whole thing is just it's out of my control, and I can't really be stuck inside worrying about it every day. And kind of my same opinion on like earthquakes and stuff like that. I can't control earthquakes, so I'm not gonna sit in my house worried every day that there's going to be an earthquake. Like, take the obvious safety precautions, but beyond that, it's
you
not
have to live life.
Right, you have to live life. And so like that was pretty much all that video was. But I totally understand why like just reading that.
Well, the video I don't know did you watch the video I shot today?
Yeah, just you sitting in your room.
It's like me sitting in my kitchen, in my dining room, and I'm just like I'm talking about like what my family's up to. I'm on holiday. I'm making more content, and then I talk about how like people should like be more community minded and share the content of the people they like. And then I mentioned the Logan Paul thing, and I think that's what did it.
Maybe, yeah.
And I'm assuming like either it's probably just like they've got some kind of algorithm, even just like searching at the words. And because I said certain words, it got like flagged. Yeah, crazy though. It's just a boring video of me sitting at my kitchen table.
Yeah,
and I was like, "What? This is flagged as unsuitable for advertisers? Really?
Yeah.
Because it's boring. Maybe that's
we don't want to advertise on this.
Oh, no one wants to advertise on this one, guys. It's just a guy sitting at his table. Oh man, yeah, definitely. I wrote on when I read that article, I posted it on my Facebook page, and I wrote best news I've heard all day. Yeah. And by the way, hey, this podcast is not using any. There's no algorithms, so I can say that guy's just man. Well, this is actually a clean podcast, but that guy is a real big stupid head.
Yeah. I have not really said anything about him publicly because I know a lot of people made videos right away about him saying or his videos and stuff, and like
of course they did.
That
gets people views.
Right. I kind of wanted to stay away from that as well, but like my whole thing with him is he's completely under my radar. He's not somebody that I normally watched anyways, or even like I knew that he existed, but like his content's not for me. It's not. Me it's not meant for me. So like it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
But
I think for me, like I heard about the whole, Suicide Forest video, and of course I didn't see it. And even if it was, I'm sure if I did some searching around, I could find it. But I don't want to look at it.
No,
because that stuff I just don't want to see. But what I did click on when that the commotion came was all about where the videos he made of being an idiot in Tokyo. Like, jumping all the vehicles at Tsukiji, which is the reason why they actually banned foreigners for a while from Tsukiji, because they had such a problem with drunken foreigners doing that kind of thing, with the big octopus tentacles slapping people and stuff in the streets. And like just that, I watched, I think, just like a couple of minutes of that video, and I was like and my wife watched it too with me, and I was so embarrassed I had to turn it off.
Yeah, it's just like is it, if there's not already enough foreigners in Japan doing stuff like that.
Like there are people who do that on a regular Friday night, sadly.
But like my whole problem with that is that I know a lot of my former students and a lot of my current students, they watch YouTube. They tell me that they watch YouTube. They tell me that they watch my videos. And like it goes that whole thing about how foreigners are perceived in Japan and how one person can just completely undermine everything. Like, and the thing is, like, my students that watch my videos, that talk to me about stuff in school, I know that they more than likely talk to their parents about it. They're like, oh yeah, Andrew Sensei, he's got a YouTube channel. And then their parents are like, great. Is it anything like this dude? Like, so that's why my channel has always, not that I would ever do any of that stuff in the first place, but like, that's why I don't do like beer reviews. That's why I don't do, like I try, like all of my videos are, because I know.
Oh, I know. I get you. I'm the same, man.
Yeah, like
I'm
I
the
know
same
that
now.
students are watching it. Like,
Yeah. Once upon a time, I did do that, but then I found out that my students were watching, or students at my school.
Yeah.
So I basically, like, I what's the term? I made private hundreds of videos.
Yeah, like stuff that I shot in college with my friends that at the time was hilarious. And I mean, it's still funny now, but stuff that maybe you don't want professionals seeing, or
even like this podcast. I mean,
yeah,
this is something I use. I mean, I've had students, like classes, listen to my podcast and analyze it and stuff, and I want it to be clean on Apple Podcasts
right.
which was once called iTunes. So I don't use profanity, and I want it to be clean. So that's why I call people stupid heads, and instead of saying something else,
right?
Because, and you're in the same case. You want just some good clean material, clean content that doesn't paint any kind of negative image of Guy Kokujin.
Right. Like my friend and I, we wrote a script, we shot a video. It's hilarious. Taken out of context, it would not be good. Like, and there's nothing wrong with the video. It's fun. It's just us goofing around, and it's stuff that we would have shot back in college. But after I watched it a couple of times and thought about it, I was like, it's funny. It's funny between my friends and I. It might not be funny to either students or it just was too many things that I was like, you know what? Like, I don't want this taken out of context. It's a goofy video, so it's not getting uploaded. Like, it is just one of those things where it's like, we thought it was funny at the time, and like, it's it's nothing bad, but it's just it's something that I thought was going to be a funny joke
at this point in life. Maybe not so appropriate for you.
Yeah, probably not.
But I think, and I hope that this is going to be kind of like a sea change in YouTube, with YouTube slamming down on someone like Logan Paul. Yeah. There are so many people out there who are just all about shock and awe,
right?
To get subscribers, and I hope that changes that.
And like I see people come to Japan, and like I've been making videos since before I got to Japan, but like really full on when I started moving to Japan. And you see this trend of people that come to Japan and they get a lot of views and they get a lot of, subscribers and stuff. And that's fine. But I question some of their motives and their content, because not that everything has to be made for me, but it's like, how does that reflect on the rest of us? I kind of worry about that kind of thing, of just how are, again, my students, they talk to me about YouTube, they talk to me about the videos they watch, and when they see stuff like this, and like, then I have to explain, no, I don't do that kind of stuff. Like, that's dumb stuff. Like, that's not funny to me, or that's not,
Well, I mean, not even like in a huge, like, kind of like way. But I mean, that's like, obviously, okay, like the Logan Paul video where he went to the suicide forest at near Mount Fuji. He's not the first foreigner who's gone there and made videos.
Right. Definitely.
There have definitely been others. But
I think,
I think
the other ones, the size of his channel.
Well, yeah, and they didn't. The others didn't find anything either.
Right.
But you kind of wonder, were they hoping to? And with like the whole idea of going there, like, that's a very clickbaitish kind of thing. No, mind you, I shouldn't. Once upon a time, my channel had a lot of videos that were very, very clickbaitish too.
Right.
But then that all changed, and now it's not. Yeah. It's very Disney Channel-esque.
Right.
Without the excitement.
Yeah. I think one of the other things that bothers me is just like the impact that he has on kids. Like, I work with kids on a daily basis, so I see the influence that media and pop culture and that kind of thing has on them, and that's just like one more thing. It's just
Yeah,
like
true.
enough.
If they worship a YouTuber who does stupid stuff, well, guess what they're gonna do?
Yeah, like
Well,
a couple of years
a
ago,
lot of
the
them try to
first
copy, right?
right. Well, that's the other thing is then you get the people, and especially here in Japan, you get the people that are I'm gonna go make the me running around Japan, the Shibuya crossing video, or here's me doing, and they show the side of Japan that doesn't actually really exist. Like they make it look like it exists when it's just not there. Um,
Mm,
but
yeah, it's an
yeah,
interesting story. I'm sure there was a lot of people, a lot of YouTubers sitting around the last few months, um, definitely having some pretty heated conversations over some beers about this one.
I'm
But
sure.
yeah, I'm sure. But yeah, so gosh golly, we've been chatting for almost an hour. That's awesome.
Wow.
Time flies, sir. Time
Yeah,
flies
definitely.
with us. Yeah. Because it's two old friends sitting down having a good old chin wag,
Yep.
and all you guys in the Just Japan podcast land, you're coming along for the ride. Yeah. So yeah, I just again, it's been a long time since we talked, so I really
Yeah.
I wanted to get you back on the podcast, and like I mentioned, I'm on holiday for the next few weeks, so I plan on trying to make as much content as I can. Gosh
Nice.
golly, and I need to get Mully and PJ back on as soon as I can as well. Yeah, maybe we can do some kind of reunion chinwag about something.
Yeah.
Those are always fun. A round table.
Yes.
Just Japan Podcast Roundtable. Um, so, folks out there listening, if you're new to the podcast and you've only listened to the last few shows, normally the podcast is just about one topic with a specific guest. Here we have a specific guest talking about a lot of different pollocks. Those are fish.
Well, we could have
Topics.
talked about fish.
We could have talked about topics, politics, or pollock. Let's go with the fish. Or the actor Kevin Pollak.
Hey, you never know.
You never know. Oh my goodness! You can tell it's late in the evening, and I'm not even partying. I'm just sitting in my bedroom at home. Yeah. So I assume you're working tomorrow, good sir.
No, it's actually Founders Day tomorrow, so we all
Oh.
it's a holiday tomorrow, so I got a 3-day.
Oh, nice, long weekend. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, enjoy it.
Yeah.
Nice, awesome. Well, where can people find you on the social medias?
Well, if you go to YouTube and just type in Higgins in Japan, or you can go to facebook.com/Higgins in Japan. That's got all the information, all the links, and all the videos and all the good stuff that I do. So
Nice. And all that stuff will be in the show notes at justjapanstuff.com. And hey, thanks for joining us again. It's been a long time. Don't be a stranger.
Yeah, definitely.
I guess that's more kind of on me because I wasn't actually making podcasts, so
That's all right.
I made you a stranger.
That's okay.
All right, it was awesome. Thanks so much.
Please hang up and try again.
And I want to thank Andrew for taking the time to stop by the Just Japan podcast. It's always wonderful to have Higgins in Japan on the show. He is definitely a very interesting man to talk to with some great stories, and he's articulate and he's fun to listen to. And yeah, so of course, like he said, you just go to YouTube and type in Higgins in Japan, and there he is, at Higgins82 on Twitter, and of course there is the Higgins in Japan Facebook page. All those links will be in the show notes. Go check him out. And now, a word from a sponsor. Hey, wait a second. That sponsors us. That's right, the Just Japan podcast Facebook page. Hey guys, if you are interested in Japanese news, Japanese culture, photos from Japan, all kinds of really cool Japan things, you need to go over to facebook.com/justjapanstuff and check it out. It's daily curated news source, news feed for you guys. That's right, you're going to find interesting news stories from a variety of Japan-based news sources, things like the Asahi Shimbun, the Japan Times, Japan Today, News on Japan, NHK, a lot of different sources. Some of it's serious, some of it's fun, some of it's my own content. There's also going to be videos from YouTubers in Japan showing really cool and amazing things. So every day you can have a fresh new feed of great Japan-related content over at facebook.com/justjapanstuff. So go over on there today and like it. That's right. You're supporting the podcast. Every person who does it. All right, folks. Well, that does it for another episode of the Just Japan podcast. Remember, the Just Japan podcast is powered by justjapanstuff.com. That's where you go to find out a lot of cool content about Japan. And of course, we do have a Patreon page. Go check that out, patreon.com/justjapanpodcast. That's another great way to support the show. There will be a link in the show notes. That does it, guys. Check out all the notes and all the links in the show notes to follow me, follow the podcast on social media. Remember, I'll put a link to that video I made on YouTube too. It always helps to share. If you really like this podcast, you want the podcast to stay around, kind of like with any content that is created that you enjoy. If you're a person who's on Twitter, retweet it when you see me or someone sharing links to the Just Japan podcast or Just Japan stuff. Retweet it or tweet it yourself. If you have already liked facebook.com/justjapanstuff, the page, when you see me post something, put a post about one of the podcasts, please share it. Because when you share it, it goes beyond me and it goes to your friends who may not know who I am or who this podcast is. And then that's going to bring in some more people into this wonderful family, the Just Japan podcast family of awesome folks who love listening to stuff about Japan. So simply by retweeting one of my tweets or sharing one of my posts on the Facebook page, you're helping this podcast grow and helping ensure that it's going to be around longer. Because, of course, as the audience grows for the podcast, the more excited I get about producing the podcast. And the more excited I am, of course, I think the more effort I'm going to put into making it an awesome show for you guys. So there we go. You guys are awesome. You're all awesome. All right, folks, so take care. That's it for episode number 176 of the Just Japan podcast. Everything you want to know about Japan. My name's Kevin. I'm in Beijing, China, but I was in Japan for a long time, and I'll be there again soon. All right, guys, wherever you are in the world, I hope you're happy, hope you're healthy, and I'll be talking to you real soon.
What?